Afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our IBMS Quality Support Hub. It's lovely to see everybody joining, and I'll just give everybody a chance to get in while I do a few introductions and say good afternoon this afternoon. We have over 200 people registered for this afternoon session, which is absolutely fantastic. But for those of you that aren't able to join or weren't able to join, the session is recorded and available on the IBMS website, as usual, alongside all of our other IBMS quality support hubs that we've done in this series. We're really lucky this afternoon because we have Dr. Mairead MacLennan join us to talk about competence and staff requirements under 15189. Mairead has worked, she'll kill me for saying this, guys. She's worked in laboratory science for over 50 years. She is so hugely experienced in both medical microbiology and veterinary medicine, but she's specialised in microbiology, quality management and training. So there is no one more qualified to talk to us about this afternoon. She's also a UCAS technical assessor, so she knows her standards inside and out. And I'm really looking forward to Mairead's talk through the requirements that we have for training and competence under 15189. As usual, please use the chat or the Q&A box. I'll keep an eye on it over the course of the next 20 to 25 minutes or so, and then we'll pick up questions in the last 5 minutes as we draw to a close, and I'll tell you about some forthcoming sessions that we have under the quality banner. In the meantime, I'm going to hand over. It's all yours, Mairead. Thank you.
Thanks, Debra. That's it. You're in trouble now. Okay, welcome everybody. Nice to see you. And let's take a wee look at what we're going to do today. My aim is to help you clarify the 15189-2022 standards in respect of training and competence requirements. So we'll examine how to meet the standard, consider findings at assessment, and a wee few thoughts on what to do and what not to do. So identifying the standards in the process, well, you all know that we've got ISO 15189, but often people forget that a big component of this is actually the HCPC standards of proficiency. And to follow on, you have to take account of your local and national policies, such as health and safety. And if you're in Scotland, it'll be ones for Scotland policies. Also, the board or trust that you work in will have statutory requirements under mandatory training. And under the standards of proficiency, you have requirements for CPD and fitness to practice. You may also still have a quality manual because, as you may well know, under 15189, it does not mandate that you have such a thing. But to chuck away your quality manual from 2012 would be madness, in my opinion. And also you will have your own standard operating procedures and hopefully some kind of training manual in your repertoire. So these are where you would go and where you would put any statements of what you might actually be doing and how you're doing it. Okay. So what do the standards say? Well, you would not be surprised if I were to tell you that I'm fully aware that nobody has read them. So my question is, how on earth can you meet the standard if you haven't read what it says? So I'm going to be dead boring briefly and tell you what's in it. You have, the structure has changed from 2012 to 2022, and under 4 you have general requirements, 5 is structural and governance requirements, and the one I want you to go away and read, which is only about a page, are the resource requirements, in which we talk about people. People are a resource. 7 is all about process requirements, how you do what you do. And 8 is how you organise what you do to deliver your system, which is the management system requirements. Under number 6, you have general requirements, and this is the one to remember. It clearly states the laboratory shall have available personnel, facilities, equipment, reagents, consumables and support services necessary to perform its activities. And when you see that little word shall, that means you don't have a choice. If you don't have it in place, you're going to get a finding. So the standard says, basically, it has 5 points. It's not rocket science. So under general, we've just described what it says. And then in 6.2.2, you have competence requirements. Point 3 is authorization. Point 4 is CPD. And point 5 is personnel records. Now, just taking a look at that, these are the high-level expectations. These are the things that as training officers, training managers, training buddies, people in training, I want you to go running away and take a look at and make sure that your documents cover these 5 points. So, in general, you must have sufficient people with the necessary skills. Wow, that's pretty difficult at the moment, but you need to have some evidence somewhere that defines what sufficient people and what the necessary skills are. So have a think about what you've got in your documents. You must be able to demonstrate that all people in your department who may influence the output of the processes have identified training in impartiality and in ethics, knowledge and understanding. So what they professionally are allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do. And you must also ensure staff are aware of the importance of meeting the needs of customers and the standard. Now, what that actually means is, have you defined what the requirements are for your customers and how your staff go about meeting the needs of customers and the needs of the requirements of the standard? So that sounds very complex, but what it actually means is that you make a statement somewhere that clearly demonstrates that in your training you address the needs of your users and that your staff actually know what the standard is and what you're training them in, how that relates to the standard. So in essence, if you're delivering training, don't forget to reference back to ISO 15189. And there's your opportunity. In your induction, your health and safety training, and any occupational health information that you're delivering to your staff, your new starts, your students, anybody visiting the department, and obviously you scale it down for them, but you must be identifying how you are operating within the ISO 15189 and also the standards of proficiency for your registered staff. So where you describe what competence requirements your staff need at different levels, you must specify that somewhere. And you must ensure that they are competent. And you must also have a process for managing that competence. And it has to be documented. Now, many people have gone to such a length discussing the new standard. It doesn't say it has to be written down anywhere, but this is one place in the standard where you must have documents to prove the competence of your staff. Now, a new part to 2022 is the emphasis on authorization. Within the job description and the person specification, or in your training manual, you need to define what staff at different levels are authorized to do. And there's a particular emphasis on those that select methods, those that modify methods, which you'd actually be mad to do unless you were a research organisation because it's extremely complicated, and how who is authorised to verify processes, and those that are authorised to release results, and those that are authorised to use LIMS, and to what extent they use the Laboratory Information Management System and amend data within the system. So you can see from looking at these things that what the standard is intending to do is actually identify what is seen as a critical point in your process, and that staff need to be specifically identified as authorised to carry those things out. So, what other types of evidence of competence is required? You must be able to demonstrate staff have been trained in the use and the understanding of the quality management system. When I say use, I mean if it's an electronic system. How to operate within that system. It might be as simple as the training for raising non-conformances, for carrying out audits, or document control, and how you can use documents, and what you mustn't do, which is use uncontrolled documents, which equates to sticking a post-it note on a computer where you book in your samples and give a new instruction to staff. That is an uncontrolled document, and if a technical assessor sees that, you're for the high jump. So no uncontrolled documentation, please. So as I said, non-conformance, and as you progress through the system, as part of investigating non-conformances, some evidence of training in root cause analysis, again, audit, and the verification that I referred to earlier. There must be some evidence of training and verification when staff are undertaking that process. And as I said already, unless you're completely bonkers, validation, because it's much more complicated. Now, I do acknowledge at this point as a microbiologist that MHRA use validation differently from what it's used in the ISO standard. So I am aware of that, but I don't know it in detail. And another one, as you progress through, is change management, evidence of training in change management, and getting up the ranks a wee bit, perhaps, risk management. So bear in mind, the evidence of competence is not just in the field of technology or science. It's also with respect to managerial competence. So don't overlook that in the process. And CPD. Now, we're all used to CPD because it's an integral part of a registrant's role in maintaining competence, so that every 2 years when we sign that legal document, I said legal document, that says we are still competent in what we do, and the proof is in the CPD that can be produced if the HCPC selects you for audit. Now, I think that this has possibly not been terribly closely assessed by UCAS, because let's face it, there are lots of implied competence by the fact that people are working and they're carrying out the role and they've got competence of their job, so on and so forth. But how closely has a TA looked at your CPD programme and what CPD your staff have? So the standard states that a CPD programme shall be available. That doesn't mean to say that the workplace must provide all of the CPD opportunities that are required for you to meet the standards of proficiency. As professionals, as biomedical scientists, we are expected to perform self-directed learning and continued professional development. So the CPD programme again must demonstrate managerial and technical aspects to it, and all shall, note the shall, participate, periodically review suitability of programmes. Now, I did have a conversation with someone earlier in the week who were a bit surprised that they should be asked this, but don't overthink it. If you're already undertaking an annual management review or a periodic management review, it doesn't need to be annually, but you need to have reviewed your processes over the period of a year. When you look at your training, you are also looking at the CPD that has been delivered or made available during that preceding year. So you're already periodically reviewing the suitability of programmes. So don't go and do an extra task to demonstrate that. Think carefully about what you're already doing and be able to defend that when the time comes. So the key requirements are competence, induction evidence, define expectations of the role, and where have you got that written down? So most people have job descriptions and they're now associating the person specification with the job description. So that meets the requirement as far as that goes. You need to define your training methods. And so that's where your training manual comes in. It's a total Bible. If you have a good training manual, then all your questions are in essence answered, as long as you then do what you've said you're going to do in the training manual. Demonstrate that all the staff meet or are working towards the standards set. For example, for registered, the GMC and HCPC, they must meet those standards and have evidence of active CPD. Now, again, one of the ways that I often see this being done is on the annual performance review that staff have. So it's a great opportunity for the manager, the reviewer and the job holder to sit and have that conversation and discuss their CPD, demonstrate that they have active CPD underway. Now, CPD can simply mean that they have performed, for example, reflection on an EQA that they've undertaken, written a little bit about it. What did I know before I undertook this EQA? What have I done in the process? What equipment have I used? What SOPs have I used? And do I know more now than I did when I started? What other implications, if it's microbiology, for example, and you've identified an unusual organism, what other circumstances might you expect to isolate that organism? And just have a little paragraph in your reflective practice about that. So that's active CPD. Mandatory training is active CPD. So don't overlook the everyday things that you can actually use for CPD. This webinar, CPD. And it's important to go away and have a think about, what did I know before this old lady started waffling on, and what do I know now that she's almost finished? For the non-registered staff, do not overlook them, but bear in mind mandatory and procedural training, manual handling, fire training are all part of CPD, maintaining and continuing your development. And the next point is you must record all of these events and have relevant documentation, SOPs, risk assessments, etc. It's always a good idea to have a training plan, and that's how the operator will be trained in the process. If you have training plans for the different identified processes, then you've got a consistency that all staff will actually follow. So, and bear in mind, once you've done one training plan, they can be used for every individual that follows on through that. So you don't have to continually reinvent what your trainer must do with the individual who's learning to ensure that they meet all the critical points of that training and are then able to complete the competency record, any question and answering that needs to be done, and any observations or witness audit. And this is where, in your training manual, you describe the assessment of the competence. How do you assess the competence of individuals? Observation, question and answers linked to the specific samples. And that linking of specific samples ensures traceability. So it's quite important to record samples that are linked to the training that someone has undertaken. And it's important to define a reassessment period. So things that you might get at assessment in way of findings. Have there been ongoing fitness for the roles with no defined expectation of each role? How can you define what is continually fit to perform a role if you haven't written it down somewhere? So everybody's guessing what that might be. So having that written down is really important for the operators, the trainers, and for the training officer and training manager. So you have consistency. There's a great reduction in stress on an individual. If you have a training plan, they understand what they're expected to do and what level they're expected to achieve. Then if you're doing that, someone's going to learn a lot easier than they are if they have no idea what they're expected to know and what level that's expected to be at. Lack of defined training methods. I just trained them. Well, how did you train them? So again, training plans that define the observation, the question and answers, the assessment, there's a witness audit, whatever you do, as long as it's written down and everybody understands what that is, and then the documents demonstrate that that was carried out. And sometimes there is no evidence of training for support staff, particularly admin staff are overlooked. So remember to include those staff in all of your training documentation. As I said, lack of active CPD. How can you demonstrate active CPD? Well, one way, as I said earlier, to do that is to demonstrate that in the annual review with staff, that the CPD that they're undertaking is listed, and the technical assessor does not need to see their reflective practice, but they do need to see some evidence that they are undertaking active CPD. And another one that comes up frequently is the lack of objective evidence of competence. Sometimes it's the job is much more complex than the evidence I see that they have been deemed competent. So the things that they've been asked to carry out, it's a bit like saying, yeah, they sat down at a simulator and crashed a helicopter, and now we're going to give them a pilot's license. So you do need to be quite specific about what you expect people to be able to do so that you deem them competent. Now, some of the to-dos are not to do. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You've all got loads of evidence, loads and loads of documentation and processes. Don't listen to this and go, oh, it's no use, I'm going to have to start again. Please don't do that. Look at what you've got, look at what the standard says, and demonstrate how what you have meets the standard. And please don't ever report that the assessor told you to do it. That's an interpretation. If an assessor tells you what to do, then you should be telling the assessment manager that your assessor has told you what to do, especially if you don't want to do it. It's quite different if you wheedle, support and help out of an assessor, and they're actually genuinely caring and want to help you, but don't then go and tell MD that the assessor told you to do it, because they didn't or they shouldn't have. So bear that in mind, please. They are there to observe. That's what we're there to do and to assess, not to tell you what to do. And please don't keep adding to an already excessively tedious process. One way that's going to, sure as eggs, get staff not compliant is if it's too long, drawn out and difficult to understand. However, do defend your approach. If you understand and your staff understand what you're doing, defend it. And no TA, no technical assessor can give you a finding if you can show how you meet the standard. They may not like it, but that's not what they're there to do. Do give examples of training and training records. Have those ready and be able to provide them, especially for the people that you're going to put forward to demonstrate things. A technical assessor is expected to be able to confirm in the report that a person showing them the processes in your lab are actually competent, deemed competent to carry that out. Ensure that you've got active CPD ongoing at all times. Take every opportunity. Half-hour webinars are absolutely great. Go digging on the internet. There's loads of opportunities for CPD. And ensure and hold your TA to task to explain exactly what is non-compliant, especially if you don't understand that. Okay. Thank you. Can I stop sharing?
Thank you ever so much, Mairead. As usual, a fabulously entertaining presentation and some really, really good hints and tips along the way as well. We do have a few questions. I'm conscious that we only have a few minutes. I'll whip through a few of them.
Yeah.
In terms of, this is one of my absolute favourites, but I'm going to let you answer, otherwise I'll climb on my soapbox. In terms of uncontrolled documentation, would having a laboratory notebook be considered uncontrolled if you're making notes whilst working on the bench for your own personal use?
That can be a tricky one. What's important about that is that an individual is not rewriting what the written instructions are and potentially making a mistake. So by all means, use a notebook for your own use. However, what's a good thing to do in that case, if you insist on doing that, and I understand it, is to sit down with the author of the SOP and get them to sign it off as correct. That would be one way of doing it. Just a suggestion.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're duplicating the SOP into your own notebook, it does become an uncontrolled document, because unless you then keep that up to date with the published version of the document and signed off to do so, then it's uncontrolled.
It's much easier just not to do that.
It's much easier not to do it, absolutely. This one's raised a few times all the way through. So, does all staff shall participate in CPD include non-registered staff?
Yes, it does. And it doesn't say in the standard, only registered staff shall demonstrate CPD. That's why I said earlier, mandatory training is something that all staff do. Participation in the quality management system is something that all staff do. Ethics and impartiality apply to all staff. These are all examples of CPD.
Absolutely. A lot of questions about levels of competence, and this is another common misnomer as well, and a one that raises a few challenges. So when developing competencies, do you have to have different levels of competence? For example, level 1 competent, or competent to train others? How do you deal with that situation?
Well, that is actually something that the lab themselves can choose to do. The standard only really expects you to demonstrate that someone is competent, or you can say not yet competent. It doesn't require levels. If that suits you better, then that's fine. One of the things, the differentiating points there, however, is when it comes to meeting the IBMS requirements, which say that people cannot sign off a portfolio unless they've carried out train the trainer. Now, I would advocate that as one of the first things that someone should be doing after they've got their specialist portfolio is actually undertaking an approved train the trainer course so that they can support staff in training for their portfolio next. So you don't really need to have different levels, but if it suits you to do that, then that's fine. But you do need to have some evidence of someone's competence to train others.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll squeeze in one more, although I'm sure we could go on to noon if we aren't careful. We'll try and answer the questions in the chat as well and come back to that. A reminder, it is available on the website. But the age-old question, and I know what you're going to say, Mairead, what is a decent reassessment period for lab competence?
Well, I'll use that phrase that you, Cass, use all the time. It depends. If it's something that you do once in a blue moon, then you pretty well much need to check your competence if you haven't done it for 5 years. That's always an example to give. However, what I would do is take a step back and look at your system. If you have, and I'll talk microbiology because it suits me, if you've got 13 competences that are based on benches and analyzers, to actually get round those in a decent period of time, it is reasonable to say they do not require to be reassessed annually or even every 2 years. If someone is constantly working in an area and they are performing well, as in it's regularly audited and they don't have loads of non-conformances that they're involved in, then I don't see why you cannot justify that a 3-year cycle meets the requirement. If there are other areas that are critical, and that may be in things like blood transfusion, cross-matching, rare antibodies and things like that, that may require more frequent reassessment. But it is actually up to your department to be able to justify what you're doing. Does that help? I'm not sure it does.
Yeah, but no, it really does. It really does help. If we frame it in a slightly different way, and probably the same way we approach audit and audit schedules, look at it from a risk-based perspective. What's the risk of not maintaining competence in an area that you don't do very often? Or likewise, is it less risky to the impact of the patient for something that you do on a regular
Absolutely.
basis?
And one thing I would say here is if someone has been on mat leave, then you need to have a program in place for retraining and refreshing. If someone's been on long-term sick, or if someone simply, because they're a mole by nature, been stuck in the corner of mycology for 5 years and they suddenly wake up and come out, or their cage is rattled and they're let loose, they need to be reassessed for competence to carry out other benches. As an example, there will be other examples in other disciplines, I'm sure, where you get somebody that's really good and really interested and they end up staying on a single bench or area discipline for some time. If they are then moved, they need to have refresher training.
Absolutely. I do need to draw it to a close. We're already 4 minutes over. I'm sure you will all join me in taking the opportunity to thank Mairead for her expertise, her knowledge and understanding, and it has been a fantastic session. There are still loads of questions coming in the chat. What I'll try and do is pull those questions off, and we'll maybe try and pull together a bit of a frequently asked questions sheet to try and answer some of those, or provide some points and guidance. But thank you to everybody. On the screen, I also have the upcoming Support Up series. So in July, we have Helen Hobson joining us to tell you a little bit more about thinking about becoming a quality manager yourself, and how you might embark on that journey. So that's something to look forward to in July, and then the next sessions in September and October. In the meantime, Mairead, as usual, thank you so much. You have been fabulous to listen to this afternoon, and I'm sure everyone's thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thanks very much. You're more than welcome. It's lovely to see some familiar names in the chat. Lovely to see you all. Thanks very much.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.